Good morning, welcome to Remember the quiz show where you have to remember. This week we're going to look at the last 6 weeks of our true Bible stories and see how much you can remember from what we've heard. Let's go to question number 1. Question number 1. Can you remember what the story was in week 1 when Jesus called someone to follow him? If you can't remember, here's a picture to help you. Yes, it was the story of Levi, Jesus calling Levi to follow him. And this is where we learned that Jesus came to save sinners, which is good news for us as we all suffer from this sin sickness. Here's question 2. Question number 2. Can you remember what we learned in week 3 when Jesus did something amazing? What was the story? Can you remember? If you can't remember, here's a picture to help you. Yes, that's right, it was Jesus feeding the 5,000. Well, we learned that Jesus can satisfy. He can provide for all of our needs. It's time for the third and final question. Let's go! Finally then, question number 3. Can you remember what we learned last week in week 6 when there was a crowd of people? Can you remember the story? If you can't remember, here's a picture to help you. Yes, that's right, it was the story of Zacchaeus, the tax collector, who Jesus came to save. And we learned that Jesus came to save and change us so that we can say no to sin and yes to following him. Well, that's it for Remember the quiz show where you have to remember. How did you get on? Well, let's see what we have to learn this morning. Over to you, Sam. Often, we need things to help us remember, don't we? We're forgetful people. Well, in our true Bible story this morning, Jesus was with his disciples on the day before he was going to die on the cross. The disciples didn't know this, but Jesus did. Jesus had come into this world for this very moment. By dying on the cross, he was going to save his people from their sins. So, he wanted his followers to be able to remember it. How was he going to do this? Well, he was going to give his followers a picture or a sign to help them to remember. And this picture was a meal. Jesus took a cup of wine and said, "Take this and share it among you." So the disciples drank the wine. And then Jesus broke the bread at the table and said to his disciples, "This is my body given for you. Eat this in remembrance of me." That's a weird thing to say, isn't it? Jesus isn't actually saying that the bread is his body, but he is saying that the bread is a picture. As Jesus gave the bread to the disciples will soon be able to remember that Jesus gave his body for them when he died on the cross. And as they drank the wine, they'll be able to remember that Jesus' blood was spilled when he died to save them. Jesus wants his people to remember. And we can forget what Jesus did on the cross. Every time we sin and think that we're too bad to be forgiven, we forget Jesus' love for us on the cross. Every time we feel alone and hopeless, we forget that Jesus showed us his faithfulness to us when he died on the cross. And every time we feel that we can never get rid of that sin that keeps coming back time and time again, we forget that Jesus has taken away our sin when he died on the cross. And so we celebrate this meal together every month when we take communion with the bread and the wine, so that we can remember the cross and Jesus' great love for us.